future generations. And this is a co-production between the Netherlands, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, the World Resources Institute, the Transport Decarbonization Alliance, the European Cyclist Federation, Walk 21 and the Dutch Cycling Embassy. My name is Lucas Harms. I'm the Managing Director of the Dutch Cycling Embassy, and I'm very honored and humbled to have such a fantastic audience here and a great selection of panelists. And we all know that there is a very urgent need to decarbonize the transportation sector. And we all know that cycling and walking can be very powerful tools to do so. So it's fantastic that we are here today to boost that message. And first I would like to invite the Minister for the Environment of the Netherlands, Mrs. Viviane Heijnen, to give some opening remarks and opening words.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining this event. I'm really curious, actually, because how many of you actually cycle? Well, that's quite a lot. Well, it's very important to cycle, of course, in the Netherlands. And we had the opportunity to cycle here in Sharm el-Sheikh today, so that was quite an experience. And I have to say that it makes us all very happy to be able to promote cycling here in Egypt. And of course the Netherlands is known for being a cycling nation, and they say that Dutch children are among the happiest in the world. I imagine one of the reasons is that they can bike almost anywhere, to school, to granddad and grandma, to football training, etc. And this gives them the freedom to grow as individuals and live healthy, happy lives. The Dutch say that kids learn to cycle before they can actually walk, so why am I giving cycling and children as an example? Well, as you know, our common goal is a future-proof, zero-emission transport system that is also inclusive for future generations. But what does that mean in practice? We can't achieve the Paris goals without focusing on active mobility, walking, wheeling and cycling. 60% of all urban trips are shorter than 5 kilometers, but we currently use motorized vehicles for more than half of those, and we can do so much better. Focusing on active mobility reduces emissions and contributes to a healthy, active lifestyle and to clean and livable cities. The Netherlands is a global frontrunner when it comes to active mobility, especially cycling. And it's no surprise when you consider that we have more bikes than people. We have 23 million bikes in the Netherlands and 17 million people. We also have an excellent cycling infrastructure, and I'm quite proud to say that the Dutch government decided last Monday to invest 780 million euros. And with co-financing of municipalities and provinces, the amount for cycling infrastructure will top the €1 billion, and we can be all very proud of that, I think. And from our experience, it's important to focus on 4 areas to make active mobility happen. It's availability, safety, accessibility, and planning. So how can we put that into practice? Well, first, active modes of transport, cycling and walking, need to be available and accessible to everyone, no matter their income or their age. Like walking from home to school or work, in the Netherlands, children get cycling lessons at primary school. And several municipalities have bicycle banks where low-income families can find an affordable bike for their child. Second, a safe, high-quality, dedicated infrastructure is vital in promoting active mobility, especially for children and for the elderly. I see that cities around the world like Milan, Lima, Paris, Cape Town and Bogota are rolling out cycle lanes, recognizing the importance of high-quality infrastructure. And we already saw some cycling lanes here in Sharm el-Sheikh as well today. Third, active mobility improves accessibility within large and growing cities. You often get to your destination faster by bike than by car, especially in congested cities that can't accommodate big numbers of vehicles. An example from the Netherlands is Utrecht, which plans to become a 10-minute city, where everything you need is within 10 minutes from your house, by bike, by foot, or by public transport. The positive impact on air quality and the environment is obvious. And finally, to make these 4 points happen, you need to educate planners to take active mobility into account up front when designing urban spaces. Investing in active mobility makes sense. The returns are a healthier population and less congested, more livable and sustainable cities. Luckily, I see that more countries and cities around the world are recognizing the importance of active mobility and taking these points into account. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many people took to cycling, and pedestrianized areas changed the way the people could enjoy their hometowns. But the increased awareness isn't sufficiently translated into action and international financing. It's important that development banks and international organizations structurally reserve funds to invest in active mobility around the world. So I'm happy to see that active mobility is being discussed here at COP27 as an important contribution towards the climate goals, and that partners like Luxembourg and the World Resources Institute, as well as the Partnership for Active Travel and Health, have called on governments to do more on active mobility. As a first step, I am pleased to launch this important call to action for capacity building for 10,000 active mobility professionals from the Transport Decarbonization Alliance. The Netherlands is not only providing expertise for following up on the call to action, we will also invest 150,000 euros in training the first group of active mobility experts. Of course, a lot more will be needed if we're to achieve the action to call goals. So I call upon you all to make similar investments. That's why I'm hosting the event today, together with our partners from the Transport Decarbonization Alliance, World Resources Institute, and other stakeholders, which will be discussed in the first panel discussion. An improved funding mechanism for active mobility, which we'll talk about in the second panel session. So let's come together on this important topic and work towards a better world for future generations. And let's cycle. And to encourage this, the Dutch delegation, who obviously cycled to this meeting, you can see one of the examples there, will donate our bikes to Sinai Governorate and the bike sharing organization here in Sharm el-Sheikh. With that said, I am happy to be able to hand over this call of action to you. Dr. Moyeldin, as Egypt's high-level climate champion, your work as climate champion and your knowledge of international climate financing will be crucial to engage governments, development banks, and others to turn this call to action into reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And now we're officially handing over the bike to Governor of South Sinai, Khaled Fauda Sadiq. Just a couple of remarks from Your Honor.
خالد هتترجم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. خد يا جماعة. خد يا معالي السيدة فيفيان هايجن وزيرة البيئة بالمملكة الهولندية.
Hello.
معالي السيد هان موريتس
Your Excellency Mrs. Vivian Heinen, Your Excellency Mr. Han Maurits.
معالي عمدة مقاطعة أوترجيخ
Your Excellency Mayor of Utrecht.
اسمحوا لي جميعا أن نرحب بحضراتكم في بلدكم الثاني مصر
Please allow me to welcome you all in your second country, Egypt,
وعلى أرض مدينتكم الجميلة شرم الشيخ
and on the beautiful land of Sinai, Sharm el-Sheikh,
الخضراء الذكية المؤمنة صديقة البيئة.
the green, smart, environmental friendly city.
I mean every word. So, green, smart, safe, friend for the environment. كما أود أن أعرب عن ذلك شكري وامتناني لمعالي السيدة فيفيان وزيرة البيئة
And I would like to express my gratitude to Ms. Vivian for this initiative
عن مبادرة قيام مملكة هولندا بإهداء 45 دراجة لمحافظة جنوب سيناء.
on the initiative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to offer 55 bikes to the Governorate of Sinai.
وأنا بوعدها إن ال 45 دراجة دول هيبقوا موجودين في المدينة لاستخدام ضيوف المدينة الكبار.
And I promise you that those 54 bikes will be used by citizens in Sinai, specifically the high level.
وليكونوا شاهد على التعاون المثمر بين مصر وهولندا.
And may those bikes always be a witness of the joint cooperation between Egypt and the Netherlands.
هنا في شرم الشيخ بدأ التخطيط لاستخدام الدراجات في التحرك.
Here in Sharm el-Sheikh, the planning to use bikes have already started.
في الحقيقة وزارة الشباب ساعدتنا بمجموعة من العجل.
In reality, the Ministry of Youth have already helped us in a number of planning when it comes to the use of bikes.
ووزارة التربية والتعليم
And the Ministry of Higher Education as well
أيضا هتساعدنا في دعم المدارس بالبايسكل.
had helped us to support schools with bikes.
في الحقيقة مش شرم الشيخ بس، أنا عايز أقول لها إن البريزيدنت السيسي بنفسه بيستخدم العجل كرياضة يومية.
So the use of bikes are not only planned to be in Sharm el-Sheikh, but also President Sisi is using his bike every day as a sport.
كل الكليات العسكرية فيها العجل لكل طالب. الكليات العسكرية بالكامل فيها الطلبة بيستخدموا العجل.
All of the military schools in Egypt, every student in military schools in Egypt, they use bikes. So for every student there is a bike.
احنا نعرف أهمية العجل وفوائده وماذا يكون به من الصحة يعني للمواطنين.
We are aware of the usefulness and the benefits of the bikes and the collective measures that they could bring with their use.
كل الشكر والتقدير للحكومة الهولندية.
My full gratitude and thanks to the government of the Netherlands.
احنا هنعلن النهارده عن صف العجل ده ان شاء الله.
We will announce today on the arrivals of those bikes.
وهنخطر الدولة والحكومة بالإهداء اللي تم.
And we will inform the Egyptian government and the authorities of this on this present.
Yes, وعشان كده احنا بنوجه الشكر ليها والعمدة ونتمنى زيادة التعاون بين شرم الشيخ ومدينة انترلاخت.
And I would like once again to express my gratitude to the minister and to the mayor of Utrecht, and we would like to see more partnership between Sharm el-Sheikh and Utrecht in the future.
نقطة الاتصال بتاعتي اللواء خالد.
The focal point would be with Lieutenant Khalid.
هو يقدر يتصل بالعمدة ويقدر يحقق
He will
معاه.
get in touch with the mayor for further cooperation.
Really, أنا كمدينة سياحية أنا عندي حوالي 20 اتفاقية توأمة مع دول العالم.
As a touristic city, we do have a partnership agreement, more than 20 partnership agreements with other countries in the world.
فلتكن أوتريخت المدينة ال21.
So may Utrecht become the 21st agreement also there.
مرة أخرى اسمحوا لي أن أتقدم لكم جميعا بخالص الشكر والتقدير للجانب الهولندي.
Once again, I would like to express my gratitude.
وكل الامتنان متمنيا كل نجاح وتوفيق.
And my best wishes to you all and every success.
وإلى مزيد من التعاون للوصول لبيئة نظيفة.
And to more partnership for sustainable and green life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Thanks so much for these lovely words. And also thanks for the Minister of the Environment. I think you all have to go now to a different session, but thanks for being here and thanks for your valuable time. We now move on to the Mayor of Utrecht. We only have 1 minute, so we keep it very short because you are also in a time squeeze. Just I have to ask you one question. I know Utrecht is the cycling capital of the world. I'm also very proud as Dutch Cycling Embassy to be hosted in the city of Utrecht, but if there's one takeaway that you as a cycling capital of the world wants to give away to other cities to speed up, what would be the lesson learned by Utrecht to take away?
Well, it would be very easy. Be bold. That is my message, because if you are not, you're not going to change the way of infrastructure, the habits of people. So if you really want to tempt and seduce people to use the bikes, you should not only offer a great infrastructure as we currently do. In our streets, cars are guests, and the bikers and the pedestrians, they actually rule the road, so to say. We offer also bikes for those children who are having families with low income. So we do a lot of things at the same time, but the most important thing that you should do is have a good plan and be firm and take your citizens on board, because if they push the agenda with you, then a lot of nice things can be done. And it's not a coincidence that an independent survey actually decided that Utrecht is the most bikers-friendly city in the world. So it's not our opinion, but those of the experts, and I'm very proud of that.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to go. I'm from the cities within the UN, their special envoy, and now with the Egyptian presidency, we will have a big meeting on mayors and ministers and how we can cooperate on climate action. So I apologize, but I have to run. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and all the best. So be bold, that's a very powerful message. Then we have one other opening remark, and that's coming from Mr. Felipe Ramirez, Urban Mobility Director of the Ross Center for Sustainable Cities of the World Resources Institute. You've been a Deputy Mayor of the city of Bogota and also Director of the Transmilenio Bus Rapid Transit System. You've more than 30 years of experience in urban transportation planning, so it's an honor to have you here. Just recently you started at the World Resources Institute, and I'm very happy to hear your take on what is needed to boost cycling and walking in cities around the world. Mr. Ramirez.
Thank you so much. I would like to start saying that I'm very happy that Bogota was mentioned here as one of these examples of cities where many things are happening in terms of mobility and in terms of biking, because that's what we have been working on and what we would like to achieve in our city. So I would like just to remember why biking is so important in our lives. And I think when we are walking or biking, there are these small things that are very nice, that we can forget of our problems, that we can think in other topics when we are biking or walking. And that's the meaning of quality of life. But why then people in our cities aren't walking or biking? We need political will. We need a lot of work in terms of having more resources, more financial resources in our cities. And that's one of the very first calls I would like to do in this panel. We need to create the Active Mobility Fund. And I want to thank the World Bank, I want to thank the Netherlands, because I'm pretty sure we will be able to create this Active Mobility Fund in order to have these financial resources that we are needing for the world. This political will that we need in the other cities that we are working on needs to be encouraged with this finance. Of course, people want to bike more, people want to walk more, but we need safe cities. And we also need the infrastructure in order to be able to have this. On my own experience, what we have seen in Bogota, where we have 10% of people already biking, is that people won't bike if they don't have the infrastructure. Some people say, but why would you build this infrastructure if here nobody's biking? But the real answer for that is that after you have the infrastructure, after people feel safe, after you can guarantee a space, a specific space for people, then people will come. And then there is where you see more and more demand for biking. So I really appreciate this space. Netherlands have always have a strong political will for doing this. And I'm very happy that you can show the whole world how this is done. Why are you so happy? Why people in Netherlands are called the most happiest people in the world? Maybe it's because of the bike. So I would like to thank you again for doing all this work. I want to give just an example of what cost efficiency in terms of active mobility networks can be seen, for example, in Sevilla, in Spain. City had spent 32 million euros on its 80 kilometers network segregated cycle lanes that serve approximately 70,000 people, 70,000 trips per day. Comparatively, Sevilla has also spent 800 million euros building its single 18-kilometer metro line that serves 44,000 trips per day. And don't get me wrong, I also encourage public transport, of course. That's my main work, actually. But we have to know that biking and walking is the most important. We all are pedestrians at some point in our life, in our daily basis. So we have to understand that people deserve this important space, that reserved space for walking and biking every day. And our infrastructure has to respond as well for everyone, from a child to an elder person. And we are all in the middle. People with discapacity, person with children on their arms, anyone, everybody has to be able to enjoy this infrastructure or enjoy these spaces in the public space that are where everyone can find each other as equal. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Felipe Ramirez. That's powerful words and fantastic examples also of Bogota, Sevilla, and other important places in the world. Thank you very much for your inspirational words. We're now going to shift to the first panel, and it has been quite some last-minute changes. So the panel will be a little bit smaller than previously announced, but I'm very happy to call forward two fantastic persons to be a part of this panel. First of all, the cycling mayor of Africa, as he's called as well, the Honorable Mayor Manuel de Araujo from the beautiful city of Calimane in Mozambique. Please join us at the stage. And Bronwyn Thornton, the CEO of Walk 21, a foundation focused on walking and walkable communities, and actually you are representing 8 billion persons in the world. The entire population, of course, of the world is walking once in a while. Giving a voice to the international stage, to local communities, to cities, and to professional communities. And she has been very powerful the last couple of days already, and a lot of sessions during COP27, so it's lovely to have both of you here to discuss the first topic that we are going to look into. And I'm going to get some slides with it, because we go to this one, yeah. So this is the first panel discussion. It's not very sharp picture, but it's an old picture as well. But yeah, you can use the microphones at hand there. So this first panel will focus on implementation. So what to do, what are important ingredients to move forward and to build cycling and walking friendly cities. What is critical in accomplishing this? And first, I would like to go to Mayor Manuel de Araujo from Calimane. So as already said, you're becoming the cycling capital of Africa, and you're sometimes also called the cycling mayor. I think it all started in 2011 with your election, and even the campaign was with bicycles and was very much focused on inclusion. So if you look back at the last 11 years of being mayor, what in your sense is the critical element to moving forward and to boosting cycling and walking in your city, and what can other cities as an inspiration learn from that?
Well, good morning. It's really a great pleasure to be at this panel with my dear friends. I think we met last in Kigali, promoting active mobility. Well, Kilimani is a very small city comparing to the bigger ones. We have 400,000 inhabitants, and it's a coastal city. We are under sea level, so very close to some cities in the Netherlands, which makes our city geographically very planned, and I think that's why people, one of the reasons why people can cycle easily. Going straight to your question, I think there are three things that we need to do to move forward. One, and the crucial one, is leadership. You need to have a leadership that has got the vision and the commitment. And if a leader has got the vision and is committed, then he will lead by example. That's what I've been doing. I cycle from home to office and from office to home, and to some meetings. So like, I show to people that I do what I mean, or I do what I say. Because some leaders, they say one thing and then they do other thing. You know, it kills the message, and not to say even the messenger. And the second issue, very important issue, it was said here, it's infrastructure. Without infrastructure, it's almost impossible to move forward. And I could tell the story of my city, where I took 10 years to have the first meter of a cycle lane. 10 full years. And when I look back, why we took 10 years? Well, in my first manifesto, in 2011, it was there. Cycle line was a priority. Mobility master plan was a priority, and so on. But it took me almost 3 mandates to be able, on the 21st of August this year, to inaugurate the first 3,000 meters of the first cycle line, not only in my city, but in my country, in Mozambique. And we are about 30 million inhabitants. But it wasn't easy. Those with cars organized themselves to fight back against the cycle lane, because they thought that roads are meant and they were built for cars, not for bicycle. And therefore, to me, it's a political issue. Promoting cycling, it's not a value-free subject. It's a power struggle. It's something that we need to take seriously, because to me, it reinforces democracy, it reinforces inclusion, because before I was a mayor in my city, those using bicycles or cycling were seen and considered as third-class citizens, as the poor, as the outsiders, because those with power would have, of course, cars, and the city was built for those with cars. So deconstructing that view of the city to make it more democratic. Why am I stressing the issue of democracy? Because to me, democracy is the rule of the majority respecting the minorities. So if we look at the modes, how many people walk, how many people cycle, and how many people use car, at least in my city and in the most cities of the global south, the majority are those who walk, and those, in the case of my city, those who cycle. But there is no infrastructure in the roads to protect those who cycle. So if we are preaching democracy, then we need to democratize the roads, making space for those who are the majority, who are those who walk and those who cycle. Of course, as I said before, it's a struggle for power. You need resources, you need to mobilize, because people are not going to accept it. Actually today, as I say, I should have been in my city at court, because I took that group of car owners to court because one of his leaders, in his attempt to undermine my leadership on promoting cycling, he posted on Facebook a lie. This year, I won the UN-related award of the UN Bicycle Day. There is an award which is given for people who promote cycling. This year, I was one of those winners, luckily. And then when I posted it on my Facebook and on the municipality Facebook that Kilimani City won it, of course, it was a setback for the car movement because something international, something happening in my city was recognized international. So they organized it themselves, and one of them posted on Facebook saying that I was using the cyclists for my own good because I only showed in my Facebook the trophy, but I did not share the money which comes with the trophy. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the award doesn't bring any money. So he lied to undermine my image, so I took him to court. And today, I was supposed to be there to make my case and so on. So I postponed because I had to be here with you guys at COP. The third, just to finalize, is the issue of safety. You can have good infrastructure, you may have lots of people wanting to bike or to cycle, but if there is no safety, which of course comes with infrastructure, then people are not going to cycle. And we have a study which was published in some journals about cycling in my city, and safety and infrastructure were the two main reasons why people were not cycling. And there are two specific groups that study showed up. The children will not bike if there are no infrastructure or if there is no safety. Women will not bike, and the elderly. The youth, like myself, we take risks. And that's why actually I'm using this crutch, because somebody knocked me from the back while I was cycling in my city. One more reason why I'm today more determined than I was yesterday to build infrastructure in my city to make cycling safe for everybody. Lastly, I was able of building this cycle line because of international partnership. And I should use this opportunity to thank the Fundo Português do Ambiente, which is the Portuguese Environment Fund, which funded the first cycle line in Mozambique. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for very powerful and remarkable words, and thank you for your leadership as well to move on. Let's stay on the African continent and let's go to Bronwyn. Bronwyn, you chaired the African Network for Walking and Cycling. Maybe you can very briefly touch upon what it is and what have been the biggest successes and how to use that in your vision to scale up the cycling and walkability of cities.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like I'm stepping out from behind this very bright light here. I shared the forum with the mayor in Kigali, and this level of passion. He should be the mayor of Africa for bringing cycling forward. It must feel a bit odd that I am the chair of the African Network for Walking and Cycling, but it's a partnership we're doing with the UN Environment Agency based in Nairobi as part of a lot of the work we are doing with them to promote walking and cycling across Africa. And so they as the lead agency and me as the chair, mostly for organizational admin, make it happen skills, is to bring people together to actually start to grow the momentum, because what we find so often is the mayor is in his town and someone else is over here and someone else is over there, and there's no sort of cohesive sense of momentum and a shared agenda and a sense of importance in all of those little pockets. And the difference between the walking agenda and the cycling agenda, and I think you touched on this at the very beginning, is that for cycling so often it's a power struggle over space with motorized traffic. For walking, it's a power struggle to be seen and understood and provided for. So it's a different type of expectation that comes from a walking agenda to a cycling agenda. So in some ways we have an easier job because we are not in that direct conflict with cycling, but in other ways that visibility. And so the network was all about daylighting that. And what we discovered when we actually did our survey work, brought together over 180 partners into the network, was that we had people working in every single African country. There are projects for walking and cycling happening everywhere. Most of the attention for cycling comes through lobby groups and advocacy for the right to exist in Africa. It's very small percentages, 2-5% of transport. But walking is often 75 to 95% of movement in our urban environments, and there are no advocacy organizations for that. The focus for walking in Africa is around road safety. So a lot of the road safety groups are looking for safe infrastructure and facilities and improvements for their communities, but they do it through a road safety agenda rather than advocacy for walking. So through the network, we've been able to map some of these initiatives, map some of these ideas. We have 7 working groups looking at research into action, data, financing, how to engage with governments, the relationship with public transport, and rural mobility. And this is a really critical one, and we were pulled up on it as well. Susan Bornstein came to us from World Bicycle Relief and said, what about rural mobility? It's a big issue in Africa, and we need to be addressing that as well. So Bridges to Prosperity and the World Bicycle Relief are part of that, and we're bringing that conversation. And even just that little step for that organization into the network has connected them up into other conversations and other networks, including PATH, the Partnership for Active Travel and Health, and this ongoing conversation. So we see that empowerment that comes from the network. So it's about empowerment, it's about profile, it's about building on synergies and realizing these opportunities. And now we're becoming a forum for outreach as Africa develops its first Pan-African Action Plan for Active Mobility. PAPAM is the acronym. It's quite good. It's like, woohoo, PAPAM. And we are using this as an outreach vehicle and an engagement opportunity to bring people into that conversation, and hope to continue to do so.
Wow, that's fantastic work. Great. And very inspirational, and hopefully something that we can scale up even also to other continents. Back to the mayor. And a very important ingredient, of course, is capacity building and to train your own staff. Maybe back away from the traditional traffic engineering viewpoint. How have you done that, and what are you envisioning for the future? How to scale up what you're doing now? To what are your next steps, and what is the role of capacity building in this?
Well, if somebody asked me what's the biggest problem that I had over the last 10 years, is capacity. You know, we should not underestimate the level of incapacity in municipalities in the global south, and specifically in Africa and in my country. For several years, actually since the 50s, when the wind of change and independence came to Africa, both groups of countries, because there were 2 groups of countries, some opted to the Western model of development, and the other group chose the Soviet model during the Cold War. But one characteristic was that both sides were highly centralized. We have the figure of the strong man and a very centralized state. And the very centralized states normally suck the value of local leaders, of local entrepreneurs to the center, because it's a very centric model. These weaknesses, local institutions, and my country was not an exception. So what happened was that municipalities were abolished and a centralized government was established, therefore centralizing most of the services. So it undermines the capacity at local level. In the last 18 years, power was devolved with the advent of the democracy, at least in my country. And what happened, the law states, at least in Mozambique, that when the government decentralized some powers, be in transport, be in mobility, be on water and sanitation, whatever, everything was centralized, the resources, both human and financial, should also be decentralized. That's what the law says. But it's not happening. What is happening is that the laws and the decrees are signed and published. Powers are given to local authorities, but the human resources never follow that journey. And even worse, the financial will never come. So you need to find your own human and financial resources to do whatever they gave you as power. That to me is one of the biggest challenges that we face. And one of the ways to answer your question, the way forward will be to strengthen capacity building between cities. For example, Utrecht has got a lot of experience. Why not get some cities from the global south either to visit or to send the people from Utrecht to these countries to promote and build capacity? The embassy, the bicycle embassy, why don't you get involved with cities in the global south to transfer technology, transfer capacity, and train people? Because in some countries, in some cities, the power is there to do things, but there is no capacity. Not both financial, but first to me, and I see it as the most important, is the human capacity. Because when you have trained people, when you have people with capacity, you know where to get the money. Money comes to me after capacity. Of course, some may say no, but you need money to build capacity. It's true. But I'm of the school that thinks that if we can train people with very little resources by peer-to-peer visits, trainings, exchange, but also with the involvement of universities. And the other challenge that we have is about the conservatism of our universities. The architecture department, the transport department, and the civil engineering are very conservative in their approach. If you look at the curriculum that they are using in Mozambique, for example, in architecture, was designed like in the 80s. Actually, it was copied from Italy from a curriculum from the 60s. So we need to put some pressure at the university level so that they are more flexible to understand the climate change language, but also the mobility language. Because they still to me, planning is very important. If architectures plan wrongly our cities, then there will be no space for us to build cycle lines. So it's very important that we touch at the university level so that they include in their curriculum more flexible ways and more modern ways of planning cities, which take into account when they are planning or designing roads, buildings, schools, hospitals. They need to have climate change and mobility as one. Like, I just want to share this to finalize. I think I'm going to write either a chapter or a book about what is it like to travel with a cask. Because I had a cask. It's a nightmare. Some airports are not prepared. So if you have an accident and like you are using that thing, you know, your life becomes miserable. Our airports are not, most of the airports in the world, and I traveled for the last 2 months, more than 15 airports, and the story I have to tell is just staggering. So we need also to look at that. Why? Because those who are designing buildings, they are not educated in terms of those with difficulties in mobility problems, the issues of accessibility, but also the old concept, new concept, the new paradigm of mobility. To me, this is my last. A city is a place, there are many definitions of cities, but my favorite is the one that defines cities as a place, a geographical place, where humans and goods do move in a sustainable manner. If you have a place with so many people, with so many goods, but those goods and the people cannot move from point A to B, I don't call it a city, it's something else. If you have somebody who is sick and you cannot take him within that time to hospital, because there is congestion traffic in the street, then that's not a city. It's something else. Mobility and transport to me should be at the core of city design, city management, city planning, and the rest. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, big applause, of course. Those are very strong and passionate words, and fantastic that you underline the importance of capacity building, the exchange between cities to move forward, and the lack of financial funds for that. And I think on that note, it's important to ask a question also to Bronwyn. So there's need to more capacity building. I think the call to action from the Transport Decarbonization Alliance is also very important in that respect. We'll hear later about it as well, and the Minister of the Environment also touched upon it very shortly. What is your take on the role of multilateral development banks? Can they play a role in this and boosting this capacity building and funds for active mobility projects?
Yeah, thanks very much. I want to actually start my response here with a little anecdote, if that's okay. The first time I came to an understanding of how important multilateral development banks and the financing was for my agenda was I was sitting in a forum in Asia, and a Korean academic gave a presentation about a village in India, and they put a highway through the middle of this village, and most of the men in that village had been killed crossing this road, accessing their work opportunities. And they hadn't built any crossing facilities or any sidewalk facilities in this village. And I can remember sitting in this, listening to this, being absolutely gutted, and so angry. How can you build something like that and not provide for safety? And that's when I discovered they do this. This happens everywhere. This was not unique to this one case study. But when I spoke to him afterwards, and we've continued to work together since then, I said, how does this happen? How can it not have been part of the project? And he said it was part of the project. It was designed in. The sidewalks and the crossings were there, but they were not delivered. The budget ran over. They got cut. And this is the beginning of my journey of going, okay, it's not just about the money, it's about the commitment, it's about standards, it's about the value that we place on these components of a project. And it shocks me that there's lots of conversations about highway and infrastructure that kills people, but this was shocking to me about the delivery. And then the second thing I learned about multilateral development banks and delivery and getting walking or cycling facilities into projects was that it depended almost entirely on the individual officer in charge of the project. There was no institutional commitment to these ideas. And the focus, the quality, the follow through for those projects was almost entirely dependent on individual officers and their commitment to this agenda. So these were two very shocking things to me, and it's been a continuing journey of learning and understanding around the power of this. And the third component I wanted to add was when we talked to countries, because we went out to do an examination of the financing from multilateral development banks, and we have a report coming out shortly on this exact topic. I can't share all the details, but I want to draw down on those findings. And the first thing was, national governments say banks don't fund walking and cycling. Banks say national governments don't ask for walking and cycling infrastructure. Now, luckily, since those moments and all of these elements, the conversation has moved forward in leaps and bounds. The conversation has moved, but not the changes and the institutional changes overtly that we would love to see. We have seen some of these steps, and I'm putting this piece in here because I know this is the next conversation, but I wanted to talk about how all of these things come together. And I'm going to be very blunt, and with respect to my World Bank friend here, I will be fairly blunt because he's going to get a chance to tell us how he's going to make it all better for us in the next session. What we found is that funding is patchy, it's hard to track, it's inconsistent, and it's poorly reported. So even when there is money going, you can't find it, it doesn't get reported, there's no line in the annual report or in the sort of the profile of this is what we've done that says this is the walking and cycling projects. And that's before we even get to the question of is there enough money, because that's an unanswerable question, but we didn't even have that as one of our criteria for the report. We weren't assessing whether there was enough, we were just looking for where it was and how it was being invested. And we found in the need to focus on our project, we focus on infrastructure build monies, because of course there's lots of stages of projects, there's development stages, different funders, different donors. We wanted to see what was making a difference on the ground. And so we focused on infrastructure build. And for work that impacts on walking in particular, we found many different motivations and therefore many different funding pots for this work. So in finding the search terms that we needed to find these projects, we had to use searching for access improvements for people with a disability, safety improvements, road safety improvements, urban development money, gender money. All of these words were used to try and find projects that made a difference for walking on the ground in our cities. And so it's not only different within the banks, but across all the different banks as well. And then a quick review of philanthropic funding revealed that there was more consistent work, and often the only real source of direct funding of on-the-ground infrastructure was coming through philanthropic funding. I know things are changing. I know there are projects coming through now. I know in Asia there's been a big focus on greenways to try and scale up the need for this sort of funding. And I know there are conversations around bicycle networks and different things to bring the funding forward. So I want to look a little bit forwards and talk now where we go, of course, with this. We've talked about a dedicated fund. We do need a dedicated fund for walking and cycling infrastructure because there are many places where we have to retrofit facilities. So we do need that money. But we also need to be embedding new design guides, financial appraisal processes that value walking and cycling, scheme modelling and outcome evaluations so that walking and cycling projects are the norm for our urban roads, not the added on extra. We should never be building roads in urban areas that do not accommodate walking and cycling in most cases. And so there's to build the infrastructure for itself. All public transport projects, all urban road projects, and most rural road projects must, so I'm leaving a little bit of wiggle room with the most there. They must include accommodation for walking and for cycling. It's just public transport needs walking and cycling. We've talked about that on other panels. And I know when it comes to multilateral development banks, it's about scale, it's about schemes being big enough, and the investment return, I heard it said, isn't always there. But these banks are full of very clever people who have designed the systems that we have at the moment. And so they can design a new system and new approaches that deliver for walking and cycling. And it can be done. I was involved in a project in Europe called the Flow Project. We reframed the cost-benefit analysis to take in the externalities of the transport system and come up with new approaches to road schemes that delivered for walking and cycling. We reframed transport traffic modelling to accommodate walking and cycling to answer the congestion question. Congestion, cities don't want congestion, and we found that walking and cycling can answer that. So we need the creative thinking, but we need to we don't want to fit walking and cycling into traditional financial appraisal systems for transport schemes. We want to reshape those schemes to fit walking and cycling. And we need multilateral development banks to have a higher profile in the reporting on these schemes and their funding so that we can celebrate that success and inspire others.
Thank you so much. Yeah, big applause. And I think that's a perfect bridge also to the next panel discussion. Thanks so much, Mayor De Araujo and Bronwyn Thornton from Walk 21. It has been an honor to have you here, and hopefully afterwards we can have a chat and continue the conversation. You really have stressed the need to scale up, and with that we go to the next panel session. And that's all about financing and finding the funds and move forward. And I have three fantastic speakers as part of that second round of the panel discussion as well. As seen, it's becoming to emerge more and more on the international agenda, yet the growth is not widely reflected in the financing of infrastructure and programs. And we're going to discuss with Nicolas Peltier from the World Bank. I invite you to the panel. Nicolas Hagelberg from UNEP. and Jill Warren from ECF. As a short introduction, Nicolas Peltier, you are the Global Director of Transport of the World Bank, responsible for transport portfolio. As I'm correct, I think there's 172 projects, a total worth of 36 billion US dollars. So it's a lot of money going around and spent on transportation. It's fantastic to exchange with you on that topic. Niklas Hagelberg from UNEP, fantastic to have here as well. The Global Coordination of Climate Change, responsible for the future of the climate change program, also active in lots of active mobility projects as part of the program. And last but not least, Jill Warren, CEO of the European Cyclists Federation, a non-for-profit association based in Brussels, dedicated to achieving more walking and more cycling actually, and boost cycling conditions for all people in Europe, but also worldwide. You are actually the world's largest cycling advocacy organization, and yeah, it's an honor to have all you three here to discuss this very important topic. And I would like to start with Nicolas. Looking back also, of course, on the questions on the elements that Bronwyn stated, which opportunities do you see from the World Bank perspective, based on also your economic rationale, to incorporate active mobility more into your support for developing countries?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a nice segue from the previous session now, and I want to start by saying that I see walking and cycling as one of the most vibrant policy area that we currently have in the transport sector. We receive a growing number of requests from the countries and the cities we are working with to look into this, how we can help them to develop this agenda. There are some good reasons for that. Starting from a development perspective, no? I mean, most of the people in the developing world don't have option. Non-motorized transport is their daily routine, no? So making sure that this can be efficient, this can be effective, is also a development story. It's not just a climate story. What is also interesting is that some of the leaders and mayors in particular, and we heard the powerful statement of the mayor of Kilimane, but we have many other mayors who are approaching us and telling us, I want to change my city, and cycling is an opportunity to rethink my city is organized. No? So it's not just building biking lanes, it's rethinking the vision for a city to make it more lovely, greener, and more better to live for citizens. No? And we heard the story of the Netherlands and how this may be correlated with happiness. I mean, that might be some correlation there. No? So at the World Bank, I see this as really growing and growing fast. It's there. It's there to stay. If we look at the trends in some of the biggest cities of the world, and we heard Felipe about the example of Bogota, but a city like Buenos Aires also has seen an increase of daily trips from 130,000 daily bike trips in 2013 to more than 400,000 today. So a very steep increase. In Bogota, I think it's the model shift was 37% of total trip to 44% today in a matter of 2 years, no? Just to illustrate how fast this is picking up. And of course, COVID played a role into that accelerated shift, but it also changed behaviors. No? So the trends are there to stay. We did some study looking at cell phone data and how people are moving, and it's quite clear that that growth of that importance of biking is going to remain. No? So that's one reason why I think we can be hopeful that this is an agenda that will continue to pick up. The second reason is that it's good economics. No? When you factor in all the health benefits, the time that can be saved, These are projects that are pretty high cost-benefit ratio. No? The example of Buenos Aires, where they build hundreds of kilometers of bike lanes, that with an ex-post evaluation, the cost-benefit ratio was 5.7. 5.7. I mean, pretty good. No? We are currently working on in Peru on a very large program to scale up biking lanes. We expect that the cost-benefit ratio could be as high as 19. So quite spectacular as well. So that's the second reason. The economics are there. A third reason is that there is a parallel agenda that I don't think we've mentioned so far in this session, but it's the trend towards electric mobility. We just published a report last year showing that in the developing world, the market segment for electric vehicle that is already growing very fast and will continue to fast is for 2- and 3-wheelers, including electric bikes. And that will be a way also to further accelerate the trend, because it's, biking with a traditional bike has some limitations in terms of distance. I mean, you can demultiply that and be even more powerful in terms of how you build inclusive transport. No? So that's a third trend. And the last one I want to mention is that cycling is not only good for moving people, it's also good for moving goods. And we see some cities that are developing last mile logistics solutions. So, using electric bicycles to deliver goods. Colombia has a very interesting program called Bicicarga that the World Bank has been supporting, and we compared this as a logistics solution compared to the traditional trucks solution to deliver, and the results are quite spectacular. No? The reduction in the time of delivery by 30%, so allowing an increase of the number of deliveries per hour by 2/3. So again, good economics, no? And I want to mention that because it's not only good for people, it's also good for goods, no? So I thought there, I heard the call for action. We are very committed. We at the World Bank to push this agenda. There are different ways to do that, and I will come back to that later. But I'm very hopeful that this will continue to grow. No?
Well, fantastic, and great to hear that it's all about good economics, or that there's a lot of good economics attached to improving and investing in cycling and walking conditions. So thank you very much. Niklas, you as UNEP, you are doing incredible work in the shared road program, supporting also a lot of governments in developing countries. And what is your take, or what's the biggest financial challenge or hurdle for you, which you have encountered to work with multilateral development banks, and how can they help, or how they have helped up to now?
Thank you, Lucas, and great to be here with you, and also very inspiring presentations from the mayor and Bronwen. So my list actually got longer and longer, what I wanted to say. We're still not quite there. It's really hard to finance active mobility, walking, biking. It's not so that the Green Climate Fund or GEF or ICI or any of the climate funds are funding this. So we're working with fumes, perhaps not the best analogy with when we're talking about getting out of those fumes, but there's very little money for raising awareness, bringing this onto the agenda, and indeed we are working with a lot of the heart and passion of the likes of the mayor and Bronwen. So first of all, we need to still reach a lot of people, and we need to make this a common discussion in media. Currently, if you see a media article or a TV story on it, it tends to be Bronwen's Good Network, or it's UNEP, or perhaps even World Bank. It tends to be one of the change agents that are pushing it forward. This is not a common discussion point in media yet. It's definitely not a common discussion point in election promises. And I believe the mayor perhaps may be a exception to the case here. So there's a lot that we need to do with awareness raising. Then also to raise funds eventually from the climate funds. We need to do a better job in including active mobility in the NDCs or in sustainable mobility strategies. So in Africa, about 9 countries out of 54 has actually included active mobility in their NDC. And NDC is a tool for accessing funding from GCF, and frankly, if it's not included there, then IKI or Jeff, they won't fund it either. So we need to ensure that it's part of those planning documents. There's very few actually dedicated teams, and I've just heard from Netherlands that their team on active mobility has been growing. But if you look, for example, in Africa, there's a handful of teams that may, at best, they may, on top of their other mobility work, they may be looking at active mobility. So unless you have dedicated teams that are out there promoting this area, reminding the urban planners to include it, it's easy that it fizzles out in the final end when we're trying to get the economics of a project together. Investment criteria, both for the development banks, but also countries, when they build a road, that some small percentage is included in the budgets, and finally the finalization criteria, so that it's not the walking and biking infrastructure that is left in the final end. And then in terms of, and this may be seen as a fairly boring item, but we're not still there with our measurements, our data points. So for example, the active mobility index, how do you measure walking and biking as one of the key criteria of an urban planning or investment object? So we're still struggling with measuring the benefits, the socioeconomic benefits. Another thing that we're struggling to measure still, and which has an impact on our ability to get funding from the global climate funds, is the carbon benefits. So it's for any GCF and JEF projects as well, we have to be able to measure what's the carbon benefits or adaptation benefit for that matter. And that one is still difficult and especially when you compare it to many other or other actions such as at energy or electric vehicles or so. So we do have quite a bit of work ahead of us, and that's where Share the Road, these type of programs, the Walk 21 comes in with helping raising that awareness and taking those baby steps day by day, month by month, and let's hope that, for example, in JEF 9, active mobility would be a clear investment object to be included. Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so taking baby steps, but going there, and hopefully bigger steps soon. Jill, what's your take on the role of multilateral development banks or other financial institutions to be investing in active mobility? And maybe in the pre-discussion, preparing for this call, you also very briefly touched upon unintended consequences from how it's financed now. Maybe you can touch upon that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lucas. Very interesting points made here. I've noted several, so thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think the first step really is for multilateral development banks to commit to sustainable transport solutions in their missions, in their policies, in their approaches, and in the actual implementation, as we've heard. In that sense, it is good to see, looking at these mission statements, etc. The World Bank describes itself as a unique global partnership fighting poverty worldwide through sustainable solutions. So far, so good. And that the European Investment Bank, for example, has an EIB Group Climate Bank roadmap, which is tied to the EU Green Deal. So those would seem to be very good preconditions for financing active mobility. What we would like to see is a true prioritization of active mobility projects and infrastructure, because that is the most sustainable kind of mobility there is. It's the mobility that brings the co-benefits for climate, reduced noise and air pollution, better public health, livability, equity, inclusiveness, you name it. And the return on investment, if you're calculating it in that way, we need to see that properly take these benefits into account, as well as the negative externalities of other kinds of investments. Also, walking and cycling quite simply need to be treated as fully fledged modes of transport, not as add-ons, not as, extras or something. It is the way that walking certainly, that everybody does at some point, and cycling increasingly. And you cannot dismiss walking and cycling as purely local issues. We see that happening too often in too many places. Oh, that's a local issue. We can't possibly be financing it from, here or there. So we also want to see clear and ambitious targets for the percentage of transport financing that should be going to active mobility. 20% is what we say. 10% to walking, 10% to cycling, whether that's a national transport budget, multilateral development banks and their transport spending, etc. We think that that gets us much closer to being equitable and fair in terms of the potential that active mobility has and what we really should be spending on it. We also want to see cycling and walking integrated wherever possible into all major transport infrastructure projects. And sometimes it's not as obvious as it may seem. Certainly it's obvious, what Bronwyn was mentioning before, a big highway project where you've got to have crossings for these things. You have to make sure that existing, so the unintended consequences, existing ways for pedestrians, cyclists to get around, that they're not cut off by motorway standard roads, by railways, etc. And retrofitting after the fact is quite expensive. We see that, I've got a couple of examples near where I live in Brussels. So a high-speed railway was built between Brussels and Cologne, and you could so easily have done a cycle highway next to it. The service road that was built in places, cyclists started to use it, but then when it was decided about 10 years later to retrofit that as a proper cycle highway, it was so much more expensive to do than if it had been planned in the project from the beginning. But also airports. Does anybody think when building a big airport how the thousands of airport workers are going to get to work every day? I had a great conversation with a woman from the Seattle Port Authority the other day who was telling me that there's quite a demand to have cycling infrastructure for the workers going to and from the airport there. And I think, that's also something we need to consider. I think railway hubs, mobility hubs, cycling parking, and the proper walking infrastructure for the catchment area and everything to make that first mile, last mile journey, as pleasant and as good as it could be. So those are just a few of the thoughts that I've got here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. You say a lot of fantastic stuff, and you also mentioned like 20%, like as a share of what should be invested. So going back now to Nicolas, we talked about 36 billion of your portfolio. Do you have any share, or is it already like, probably it's not 20% that is being invested in active mobility? But I'm happy to hear your take on that. And also because you talked about the economics and all the elements that you see, the rationale for improving that, and what does that mean for scaling up the share, maybe to 20% or maybe to 10% of the portfolio, and what is needed to have structural funding for active mobility projects from the World Bank position?
So I think if we want to scale up active mobility, we need two things. The financing is one part. The knowledge is another part, and that's equally important. And let me start with that, because one of the outcome of that session and what the announcement is this call of action that the Netherlands has been promoting to put in place a capacity building program for active mobility. I think that's great, because that will certainly help beef up on the knowledge side. At the World Bank, we are also working on this and trying to organize ourselves. The way we did it, we have 300 professionals working in transport all over the world. Now, some are based in Washington. A big part of them are working in countries. And we brought them, all of them to Washington a couple of weeks ago for our annual Learning Week. And as part of that, we trained all of them in what are the active mobility solutions that are out there today, so that they keep that in mind when they design and implement a project, that they know this is part of the toolbox. No? And this is really a very vibrant area right now, and we even we decided to create a specific knowledge group so that we create a network of all those professionals so that when an innovation happens somewhere, it can be really quickly transferred to another country. So I hope that will help. Certainly, the vision here is that when we start engaging on urban transport anywhere with a client country or a city in the world, our professionals know that they need to engage at the same time on active mobility, and this is part of the toolbox. And let's see how far we can go. You know, sometimes cities are not ready to go as far as we would want them to do. Sometimes they are big champions of that, and we can push the frontier. You know? So that's one. Now let's come back to the financing. You know? So yeah, we have an active portfolio of 36 billion. This covers all transport modes. 60% of that brings climate co-benefits, half on mitigation and half on adaptation. We want to push this further. And this is why in Glasgow, with the help of the Netherlands, but also the UK, Germany and Luxembourg, we created a new financing instrument called the Global Facility to Decarbonize Transport, which is already operational. No? And I'm happy to report that this facility is already supporting some program, including on active mobility. And this, this facility could ultimately become this active mobility fund that we were discussing about. No, I mean that would be ambitious. If we manage to rally enough donors and contribution, we could even think about creating a specific window for active mobility within this facility. Now, in our operational portfolio, I think we have two generations of active mobility projects today. The first one is active mobility programs that emerge as a result of a dialogue around an anchor investment, such as a metro line, such as a BRT line. So, around the mass transit system, where the conversation becomes how do we interface public transportation with biking and with walking, no? And so how do we rethink stations? How do we extend the catchment area by building bicycle lanes? So this is, for example, a program that we supported last year in Buenos Aires. We financed two new urban rail. And around this urban rail line, there was a very serious work to interface with biking lanes and to extend the biking lane network, to extend the catchment area. This is something that we are working on in Brazil in a consortium of cities called Itajaí, where about half of the loan that we will be giving to the government is going to be put into building biking lanes. And this is a really nice story because it's an inclusion story. It allows to extend the public transportation system to some of the poorest neighborhoods in the cities. No? So it's not only green; it's also inclusive. No. So that's the first generation, no? Starting from a mass transit system. The second generation of program that we are starting to see, and our new facility helped in doing that, is Lima in Peru, and there. The conversation started from biking lanes. Now, the government came to see us and the city of Lima, saying that they had this vision to develop biking. They wanted to reach 1,100 kilometers of biking lanes in the cities, and we said, "Fine, let's go together. We'll help you on that." And this is combined with a traffic management program. Because Lima is a city that has a problem because the number of cars I mean, the level of congestion is disproportionately high compared to the level of cars. So there is a problem of the way they manage traffic light management. And so we work with them on that, on how to optimize traffic, and that helps to free some space to build biking lanes. No? So it's a really, really nice program where you work in a holistic manner on the way you manage your traffic flows, so that you can develop biking as a solution. And this is a bit what I call the second generation type of active mobility project. And really, I hope that we'll be able to create this active mobility fund to step up our global facility to decarbonize transport, because this can help us to push more and more of these second generation of active mobility programs. No?
Wow, thank you very much. That's very thoughtful and great to hear about this active mobility fund. Would be lovely to hear more in the future, and hope that it's really a window to do more these beautiful projects that you're talking about. Thanks so much. Niklas, Bronwyn already very briefly touched upon the Africa Network for Walking and Cycling. Maybe looking at that project or similar projects, and looking what Nicolas told about this active mobility fund. What is your take on this, and how could this help an active mobility fund, for instance, to push your work and to push forward?
So we have high hopes for this fund already. So let's next week already, let's talk about it. Now, we're still at the stage where investments into active mobility or projects that promote active mobility, we're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whereas then when we come into public transportation, electric mobility, that's where it's in the tens of millions of dollars. So there's an order of magnitude of difference. Plus, if there is any larger amount of money coming into active mobility, it tends to be as an add-on to public transportation or electric mobility projects. It's a small addition, and we have managed in a few IKI projects, in a few JEF projects, add it in there. So it's not the main drive yet, so that's where we need to get to. In terms of perhaps the priority for the work, it's really that we get to a stage where country use their JEF star allocation and prioritize active mobility, or as Nicholas, you mentioned in Peru, the Lima, that they actually, that was what they asked. That to me is a key performance indicator for us, that once that's not just from one or two cases, but where we see a clear demand for it, where 10 countries per continent are asking for it, that's where that facility really needs to come in. Usually establishing a facility is a very good way of raising awareness, because it just demonstrates that there's funding there. So that's something that we also need to take that opportunity, and I think that with Walk 21, the Share the Road, UNEP, we would be very happy to work with the World Bank and the other development banks as well on promoting the facility, so that there will be a demand for it, if that will then help you with raising funds for the facility.
Thank you so much. That's all very hopeful words, and let's continue the good work. Jill, sort of a final questions to you. You told last year that was your first COP that you went to in Glasgow, and those were, I think, first baby steps, but very successful, I think, in a very small way. Together with a couple of other organizations, you pushed forward during COP27 now, and maybe can reflect a little bit on that. Where do you stand now, and how, in light of these developments, Active Mobility Fund and other pushes forward, how do you see the future, and where do we stand now with, for instance, the PATH initiative?
Okay, just 1 minute to recap what happened at COP26 last year. There was a draft transport declaration. It focused only on the electrification of vehicles, only, as if that were the only measure you would need to take to decarbonize transport. That was shocking on the one hand to advocates like me, but it was also a perverse gift because we could, we could advocate off the back of that and say, look, you'll never get there fast enough, just doing that. That by itself is not going to work. So it allowed us to draw attention to the role that active mobility, public transport, etc. would need to play. And the European Cyclists Federation put together an open letter calling on governments to boost cycling levels to address climate change. And the attention that generated before and during the COP prompted the European Commission delegation to push for an amendment to the transport transport declaration that recognized the importance of a wider system transformation, including active travel, public and shared transport, and taking into account the emissions generated in the production and disposal of vehicles. Okay, why is the electrification of vehicles often pointed to as kind of the solution? I think there's two reasons. I think it's the thing that looks the most like the status quo, so it's easy. I think the second reason, which we have to recognize, is the lobbying of the automotive companies that's there. That, we run up against that all the time, and what they spend in lobbying in one day would way exceed my budget for an entire year. But leaving that aside, this year we've got a fantastic coalition of NGOs that have come together to form the PATH Coalition, Partnership for Active Travel and Health, to draw more attention to the role that active travel, the greater role that active travel must play in decarbonizing transport and improving people's lives. And we've got organizations on board like FIA Foundation, who's funding the work, Walk 21, ECF and World Cycling Alliance, UNEP is there, SLOCAT, ITDP, WRI, Transport Decarbonization Alliance, Dutch Cycling Embassy, Bikes, Africa Network for Walking and Cycling, and Share the Road. So, really a very powerful coalition of actors. So what do we want to do? We want to quantify and advance the understanding of the role that walking and cycling can play, the issues, the benefits, the enormous potential that's still there. We want to leverage and amplify the very good work in this space that's being done by all the partners. We want to provide guidance and tools to be able to help the stakeholders to advance walking and cycling. And we also want to just, quite frankly, achieve the impact of accelerating the climate goals. And there's a very strong business case behind all of that. When we measure those benefits in economic terms, they're fantastic. Just maybe one more anecdote here. I was speaking before the European Parliament Committee, Transport and Tourism Committee, about 10 days ago, and there was also a representative from the city of Copenhagen there talking about how they calculate return on investment for the various cycling infrastructure investments and things that they do. And the thing that delivered the highest numbers ever in the way that they calculate that was their analysis of what the cycle superhighways would deliver. And so I think that's just one more thing that shows you why we need to and what the benefits are there beyond all of the co-benefits I mentioned before.
Thank you so much, Jill, and keep up the good work. Yeah, fantastic. A big applause for our fantastic panel. Time is almost up. I feel personally enlightened. I hope the public does feel enlightened as well. Really strong comments and fantastic to move forward. I feel hopeful. We've seen the transformational power that cycling and walking can bring to communities. We see that there's urgent need to scale up. It's doable. Maybe there will be an active mobility fund that is pushing forward. So I'm very hopeful, and let's look ahead and celebrate what we already have accomplished, but also aim for even more. So also looking forward to COP28 and see what next year we have to look onto. Thanks so much for being here. We now go to the, thanks very much for your inspirational thoughts, and let's continue the conversation. We now go to the last bit of this session. Maybe my lovely assistant can see if we can move to the next slide. We have some technical difficulties, and it is also good to know that the room doesn't seem that busy, but there's a lot of people looking at us online, so we are being followed. So it's not only us in the room, but it's a whole international audience that we've been speaking to. So thank you. I want to invite Michelle Buffington, representing the state of California and chief of the Transport Decarbonization Alliance at this particular moment, or representing the chief position, the chairing position, and also Mohamed Hegazi. He is representing the climate champion team from Egypt. Please come and join us for the handover of the call to action of the Transport Decarbonization Alliance. Lovely to have you both here. Michelle, maybe you want to explain briefly what it is, the call to action is about, and then hand it over symbolically to Mohamed.
Sure. Hello, thank you. Today's session was incredibly inspiring and insightful. We have a daunting but achievable goal ahead, net zero by 2050. It will take a variety of solutions and deep collaborations to get there. This includes decarbonizing the transport sector using tools like zero-emission vehicles and active mobility. Each person and place is different, and we need appropriate and affordable solutions. I would like to thank the Benelux Pavilion for hosting this event today and for including the Transport Decarbonization Alliance. This alliance is committed to bringing together countries, regions, cities, and companies to collaborate and share lessons learned across all efforts. This call for support is a key example of that commitment. This call for support emphasizes the importance of active mobility and calls for $100 million of investment to train professionals in areas like planning, design, safety, and implementation. I'm honored to present this call for support to the road transport sector co-lead from the Climate Champions team. Thank you, Mr. Hegazi, for accepting this call of support on behalf of the Egyptian Climate Champion. We hope to continue to work towards the critical targets outlined within. To that point, we look forward to continued conversations with the World Bank and other financiers on opportunities. I hope that these discussions help and encourage you. We are not alone in this often difficult work, but together we can go further and faster.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say that on a very personal note, I'm honored to be here. And I learned how to cycle like 10 years ago as an adult, and ever since I've been using it every day to commute in Cairo. And if we look at, thank you. If you look at our work in the Climate Champions, like we heard about the focus on ZEV last year, and I think that Nigel Topping, the Climate Champion, said it very eloquently yesterday in the Marrakesh Partnership event, which is that when the Climate Champion started a couple of years ago, transport was ZEV, ZEV, ZEV. And over time, as we learn, because this is a collaborative process, we expanded it, and it's still ZEV, 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 but it also now includes avoid and shift elements that are very important. And from being a person who cycles in Cairo, if I have a bus running on diesel in front of me, I really want it to be electric. And then I will always ride a bicycle. So this is how I choose my routes. It is based on the ones where we don't have the diesel buses running. So they all fit together. I'm super delighted that we have been able to bring into the sector transformation breakthroughs, 2 new breakthroughs this year, one dedicated to the expansion of public transport, and as we heard, this is by definition related to the expansion of bike lanes, and this is now a specific target with a specific aim to increase it to a particular density in cities to ensure that bike and active mobility networks are really all-encompassing and part of the North Star that we work towards on the global level. So thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, and I'm delighted to be the recipient of this.
Thank you so much for this symbolic gift over of the call to action, and thanks for your lovely response. And let's see how we move it forward and build the capacity that is needed to transform cities and societies around the globe. Thank you so much, and thanks also to the public. Thank you very much for being here, both physically and online. And I wish you a fantastic and fruitful remainder of the day, and hope to see you again. Thanks.